This is Mel Thompson, and this is a podcast and a series of podcasts about political risk. After 4 years of economic turmoil, the Egyptian central bank policy of limiting deposits of dollars made into bank accounts has strengthened the central bank. This policy was instituted as a method of mitigating the risk of currency black marketers. By implementing these caps on dollars, the black market activity was reduced, and the fact that it has been reduced is a good thing for the central bank. But the problem is the cap also acts as a suppressant, if you will, to foreign direct investment and business deals. The caps that were imposed in February of this year were $10,000 a day up to a maximum of $50,000 a month on hard currency deposits. In other words, you could not put in more than these caps, and according to sources, the questionable deposits far exceeded these caps. So yes, they cut off the big money that was coming in and being laundered through. But these caps are pretty small if you're looking at foreign direct investment projects and companies conducting business overseas. They are really small. They are not small for the average person going grocery shopping and putting gas in their car here in the States every day. But when it comes to overseas business and global trade, these are really, really tiny. As in all policy changes, as in all types of changes, there is an inherent political risk in this particular policy. In the case of Egypt, vendors, companies, and manufacturers were harmed due to the cap and the inability to acquire large sums of dollars to spend on imports. So this is the problem that was created by a policy that actually was well intended. This slowing of the supply chain due to the limits on imports of raw materials and the ability to buy and finance different things is something that is slowing the economy, not only of Egypt, but also slowing the internal economies of investors and companies trying to maintain the business model that was created prior to the caps going into effect. Foreign direct investors and global companies relying on these local vendors in Egypt that are impacted by these caps are not going to be able to overcome them unless they are tweaked somehow. Whether they're going to be tweaked is up in the air at this point. The bottom line is that the reasoning behind the policy change is understandable, and that understandability of why it was done does not lessen the burden of the political risk created by this change. A lack of preparation by foreign direct investors and companies conducting business in Egypt could have been a larger contributing factor to any losses than the policy itself. In other words, not seeing this train coming and mitigating the risk by stocking up and storing cash in other ways was just as much of a culprit in any losses as was the policy change itself. As I have frequently said and frequently written about and stated, planning is a much more effective tool against political risk than any insurance contract can ever be, or any contract, even a treaty. Contracts and agreements cannot and do not cover everything. International law protections and even some treaty protections rely on the internationalization of the contract. Without that factor, without that clause inserted, you lose a legal tool to recover some losses. If the red flag wasn't red enough for people to see this coming down the road, I can't possibly give you any more information as a client than you could have obtained just by looking at a newspaper. This was obvious. The red flag for this policy happening was not raised in February of this year. It appeared in 2011. That's when the Egyptian economy began to tank, when governmental stability became an issue and was one that was so pertinent and so obvious that something had to be done. You knew something had to be done. You knew there were some issues with black marketeers, with corruption. Obviously, what is the central bank going to do? Protect themselves somehow. So how would they do that? Let's try to crack down on the black market at some point. This was coming. This train had its lights on, and you could see it coming several years ago. The governmental changes mean policy changes, and an obvious one was monetary policy. This was telegraphed to foreign direct investors and companies doing business in Egypt 4 years ago. The real casualties are the people in the country. that did not grasp the potential political risk of changes in governmental changes to monetary policy, the people who on the ground who are vendors who have they're just working stiffs. They have no idea what's going on when it comes to the intricacies of political risks and how the government policies work and how they would impact them. Those are the people who are suffering the most. They are now unable to import or afford to export due to the lower level of available dollars. As always, the lesson is to pay attention to political instability and prepare multiple plans that encompass monetary policy changes that may restrict cash flow and availability. By not doing so, you will run the risk of slowdowns in supply chains for the very people in the country that make your foreign direct investment or business venture profitable. This has been Mel Thompson.